Sleep, the non-negotiable foundation for performance, recovery, and longevity. The truth is that everything you optimize, perfect diet, perfect nutrition, perfect everything else, it really means nothing without proper sleep. So let's get into it. All right, the cost of sleep deprivation. So a bunch of different costs, right? So 48 hours without sleep is impairment equivalent to 0.10 blood alcohol content with a reaction time decrease of 20 to 30%. So I don't know about where you guys live, but where I am, at 0.10%, you're beyond the legal limit to actually even drive. So metabolic damage. So sleep loss impairs insulin sensitivity within one night. Your fasting glucose increases because of cortisol going up. Your immune suppression, especially if you're sleeping less than 6 hours a night, gives you a 4 times increased infection risk. The T cells are part of your immune system and their production drops by about 50%. Additionally, sleep deprivation has a major cardiovascular impact. It increases your blood pressure, it has a negative impact on your heart rate variability, and your inflammation markers, including C-reactive protein and interleukin-6. You also have hormonal cascades. So again, cortisol elevation, which results in a disrupted diurnal rhythm, reduced testosterone, elevated ghrelin, which is your primary appetite hormone, and reduced leptin, which is your satiety hormone. This is one of the reasons why you end up having way more cravings the next day, because your cortisol is up, which redistributes fat to your abdominal area, and it also affects your ghrelin and leptin, which makes you feel hungrier and less satisfied. You have a major hit to your central nervous system recovery, and this is not to be underestimated. So metabolic waste accumulation, so this includes tau and amyloid beta plaques in your brain, and these are typically what over time, over decades, end up being a major contributor to dementia and Alzheimer's disease. And partially these tend to accumulate because you don't have the lymphatic clearance, which you would normally have if you have a decent night's sleep. And here's the kicker, your amygdala hyperactivity without your prefrontal suppression causes you to be 60% more reactive, which means that you're far more reactive emotionally and generally it tends to skew in the negative direction. So if something good happens, you're not necessarily going to be feeling as good about that, but when something bad happens, when you have an adverse event, it's going to be amplified by about 60%. And of course that results in mood disturbances and anxiety amplification as well. So there have been a lot of studies done on sleep and the true financial cost, but one of Harvard's studies that were done relatively recently showed that insomnia alone costs the US economy over $63 billion annually, with the average worker losing about 11.3 days of productivity. And productivity hits in general from sleep deprivation result in increased absenteeism, more errors when you're doing your work, more time to complete your tasks, as well as reduced attention and decision-making capabilities, which are primarily coming from your prefrontal cortex inhibition, which is the part of your brain that's responsible for doing the bulk of the analytical and strategic decision-making that you do in a day. Now let's look at the benefits of actually getting enough sleep. So metabolic optimization, you have a lot of the things that we just discussed which get improved. So improved insulin sensitivity, stable blood glucose, normalized cortisol rhythm, which means that you feel alert in the morning when you wake up. You're able to get drowsier in the evening as your cortisol drops and your melatonin goes up. Preserved testosterone levels and the correct ghrelin and leptin signaling. Again, major impact, cognitive sharpness, improved attention, improved working memory, improved executive function, improved decision-making speed, improved learning and adaptation which includes neuroplasticity, skill acquisition, and memory transfer. So anything that you're exposed to, anything that you need to learn, especially when you're exposed to new content that you need to pick up, your ability to learn is significantly better. One that's very, very near and dear to me is physical recovery. Muscle protein synthesis optimization, glycogen repletion, inflammation resolution. These play a massive, massive impact which cannot be understated to your overall longevity and just general health and well-being. And sleep is very near and dear to me because it's something that I have struggled with tremendously for many years. And while I still have a long way to go, I also have made significant progress. So again, overall immune function, T-cell mediated immunity, acute response capacity, and chronic inflammation suppression are all improved when you sleep enough. Longevity biomarkers, so reduced all-cause mortality, 29% lower with consistent 7 to 9 hour sleep, reduced neurodegenerative disease risk, and improved cardiovascular outcomes. These are, again, impossible to overstate how important these are. Emotional resilience. Now, I personally have noticed when I have a terrible day, there have been days that I was thinking, oh, why didn't I feel horrible about this day? Everything went wrong. I've noticed over the years that on every occasion where I had a rough day and I didn't feel as bad as I could have or maybe should have, I noticed that I had slept okay the night before. And similarly, when I look back, there have been days that weren't that bad, but I just felt horrible. And primarily that has had to do with my quality of sleep the night before. So if you guys start paying attention to these things, you will notice patterns. I definitely have, and I am a complete believer in really maxing out your sleep because it is literally a game changer. So emotional resilience will again help you with that amygdala regulation, stress buffering, and mood stability, and your performance ceiling. Again, one thing I've noticed is that when I've resistance trained and I'm really sore and then I sleep well, the next day I feel like $1,000,000. I feel so much more recovered, and that tends to increase exponentially. Going from 6 hours to 7 hours makes a massive difference. 7 hours to 8 hours, depending on how much intense work you're doing, can also be massively beneficial. And there have been times when I've been training and working full time and the cognitive and physical load and stress during the day has been so high that 9 hours has generally been what I actually needed. And I have felt 1,000,000 times better just by getting a little bit better sleep and more sleep. While that does seem like a lot, an extra hour of sleep can more than pay for itself in your productivity and attention gains the following day. And that alone makes it worth it. So sleep architecture fundamentals, why does the quality also matter? So there's a two-process model. We have homeostatic pressure, which accumulates with wakefulness and dissipates with sleep, and our circadian rhythm, which is our 24-hour biological clock. And then we have our deep sleep and our slow wave activity density. This is where our brain cells synchronize with each other. Again, we clear that metabolic waste, the tau and amyloid beta plaques, and we restore cognitive capacity. REM sleep is where we typically consolidate memory, we have pattern integration, and we refine the signal and noise in our learned information throughout the day. The sleep fragmentation is an important one. So if we've got broken slow wave activity accumulation, we tend to have incomplete restoration even if we have slept enough. So a 3-hour bout of sleep and then a 4-hour bout of sleep sometimes isn't equal to 7 hours of continuous sleep. Now, there are some individuals who do show superior slow wave activity density, and this tends to be a genetic variation. So in those cases, quality can partially substitute for quantity, but in general, you really still need 7 hours of sleep every night. So how do you improve your sleep duration and quality? Well, one of the things is sleep pressure alignment, and this is primarily a circadian timing issue. So if you have a fixed sleep-wake schedule, if you're able to synchronize your sleep to within about 30 minutes daily, it synchronizes your homeostatic peak with the circadian dip. So this is your adenosine buildup throughout the day and your circadian dip as your melatonin production goes up and your cortisol drops later towards the evening. And typically speaking, everything that has to do with pre-sleep is conditioning. So it doesn't really matter what it is. This could be turning the lights down low. This could be increasing exposure to warm light in the evening. Anything that really gets you into a habitual state where you condition your brain into knowing that now is the time we need to start winding down. So once you start doing that an hour before bed, it doesn't matter. It could be something as simple as eating 5 carrots before sleeping. It's not about the carrots. It's about the fact that you're doing that every single day, which conditions your brain into believing that now it's time to start winding down for sleep. So doing this reduces your sleep latency, which is basically the amount of time it takes you to fall asleep. It increases your fragmentation resistance and it stabilizes your sleep architecture. So more continuous sleep and less fragmented, sleep-wake cycles. And your chronotype does matter. So some people who have ADHD report they tend to perform better at night. And this has also been demonstrated by some literature in the sense that they perform better at night and with a later start in the day because their circadian rhythms are naturally a little bit shifted compared to neurotypical individuals. But you have to find out what works best for you. And again, we want to avoid circadian disruption. So bright light exposure, blue light exposure within 2 hours of sleep just gets your brain into the sense that, hey, it's still daytime. It's still daytime. We need to stay awake. And it delays the circadian phase and shifts your bedtime later. This is why when you wake up, if you can get blue light and ideally sunlight hitting the back of your eyes, and this doesn't mean looking into the sun, this could be being outdoors when it's bright and sunny, it reinforces the circadian rhythm and the circadian clock, signaling to your body that now it's blue light, now it's morning, now is the time to be awake. So it kind of reinforces that mechanism in your mind and gets your circadian rhythm even more kind of dialed in. And this is why we are training our circadian clock. So the caffeine window, caffeine has a half-life of about 6 hours. So we want to stop intake at least 8 to 10 hours before targeting our target sleep time, ideally 10 to 12 hours, but at least 8 to 10 hours. And this includes not just coffee, but this includes black tea. This can include high amounts of even chocolate because cocoa does contain some amounts of caffeine. And we want to be careful of our naps as well. So napping can be great if you haven't slept that well, or if you prefer to sleep 6.5 hours a night and then take a 30-minute or 45-minute nap in the day, if that tends to work well for you, then that's fine. But if you are napping, you don't want to nap so much that it starts to encroach on your sleep at night, or to the point where it starts shifting your circadian rhythm such that you feel less tired at night. Because naps can fragment nighttime sleep pressure by affecting your adenosine levels, unless you're specifically trying to recover some sleep and pay off some sleep debt, and we'll talk about that later. Generally avoid naps unless you really need them. Another thing is optimizing the environment that you're in. So we tend to sleep best between 65 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit. I personally sleep better in even cooler temperatures, but most people tend to do really well around this temperature range. And this temperature range tends to facilitate slow wave activity, and it helps drop our body temperature, which again is a signal to our mind that it's time to wind down our metabolism and get ready for sleep. Similarly, lighting, we want to dim light 1 to 2 hours before sleep, and especially turn light colors warm as possible. And during sleep, we really want full darkness, and whether that's a blackout or an eye mask, and it helps avoid circadian phase drift. And I personally have found this to be incredibly effective. There have been places I've been where I've had blackout shutters on the windows outside, and I could literally sleep the whole day. I mean, it could get too far unless you set an alarm. So you do want to wake up and then expose yourself to light, but having that darkness when you sleep makes a world of a difference. Similarly, our mattress and pillow need to be comfortable. And this is where it's a matter of investing in your sleep. You have to think of sleep like it's a workstation. You're spending a third of your life there, or you should be spending a third of your life there. And it's as critical to your overall performance during the day as anything else is. So if you want to work at your peak, you want to exercise at your peak, you want to be at your peak in generally any area, sleep is going to help get you there, especially if you're not getting the optimal amount or close to how much you should be getting. So as far as sleep continuity goes, we want to prevent fragmentation to whatever extent that we can. So if we do have sleep apnea, and there's a lot of people who do, then that's something that you need to address with a medical professional for sure. Alcohol is another one. A lot of people think that alcohol is going to help them sleep. It doesn't. Alcohol will help you fall asleep, but it's typically going to result in lower quality sleep for the rest of your night compared to not having alcohol. Similarly, if you drink a lot of fluids before you sleep, and if you have to constantly wake up to go pee in the middle of the night, that's definitely going to fragment your sleep, and you're going to wake up feeling more tired, even if you do technically sleep 7 or 8 hours throughout the night. And again, one of the things that has helped me is box breathing and progressive muscle relaxation. So everyone holds tension in different parts of their body. For me particularly, I've noticed that I tend to hold a ton of tension in my eyelids. And I used to wonder what the point of sleep relaxation was and progressive muscle relaxation was. But it's only when I made a conscious effort to reduce the tension that I was holding in my eyelids that I began to fall asleep a little bit faster. And that's made a big difference to me. It seems like a small thing, but it's made a huge difference. And I've also suffered from racing thoughts. So the other thing I've done is imagine something completely dead or boring. And that can be counting down from 1,000 to 0 backwards, or it could be just thinking of a rainy black and white, drive-in theater blank movie screen. It's just something completely boring and mindless. And just trying to keep those things at the forefront of my mind, especially as I'm in bed and trying to sleep, I will focus on that black screen and I'll focus on making sure that there's no tension in my eyelids. And that has made a huge difference to me personally. And I strongly recommend that you guys troubleshoot where you're at and where you're struggling with sleep, because understanding what is specifically holding you back is going to be what enables you to make the changes that fix that. So guys, if you're enjoying this so far, slam that like and subscribe button for more awesome content, and make sure you grab the TDEE calculator in the description below. Also, I'd love to know from you guys, what have you found that works really well for you? I'm always trying to improve my sleep. I would love to know what you guys are doing to improve your sleep. Okay, so some more advanced levers in personal optimization. So if you're doing high intensity exercise, really try and complete it at least 3 hours, if not more, before sleep, because it amps you up, it increases your cortisol in the short term. And if you do it long enough before, that will help you increase your slow wave activity and density too. So sauna use is also really good. Post-exercise sauna induces that temperature drop that your body needs to help you fall into sleep, and it enhances your slow wave activity density too. This is another one that has helped me in particular, is having some carbs before sleeping. And I'm not talking loading up on carbs so that your blood sugar spikes. You don't want to be doing that. But again, when you do have that small carb spike, your insulin will go up, and that will boost your serotonin a little bit. And there's always some amount of your serotonin that gets converted to melatonin. So it could help, and it's worth trying to see if it helps you. All right, so sleep quality optimization. Magnesium glycinate. Again, magnesium supports GABA signaling, which is going to have a modest effect. It is not magic, but GABA is another relaxation pathway in your brain. And magnesium, especially if you are deficient in magnesium, this could definitely help you out. Glycine supplementation is something else. So glycine also induces a mild temperature drop and a modest slow wave activity density enhancement, so that you may find that a small amount of glycine before bed also helps you. Low dose melatonin, so between 0.3 and 1 milligram, especially if your circadian phase has been shifted. So this means if you stayed up all night, or you stayed up very late the last night and had a late waking this morning, or jet lag, a small amount of melatonin can help get your circadian rhythm back in sync, but it's not something that you should necessarily psychologically depend on. One of the issues that I had when I had sleep issues was the doctor was prescribing fairly strong sleep medication to me, and it just did not work for me at so many levels. So I would strongly recommend against sleep medication unless you have a strong medical reason to actually have that. Do what you can to try and address the underlying causes rather than rely on medication as a crutch. So it does help to track and measure your sleep quality. So Oura Rings, Whoop Rings, Apple Watches, none of these tools are going to be perfect. None of them are clinical grade, but they can provide some indication of how often you're waking up and sleeping throughout the night. So they can definitely be helpful as a rough guide. Another thing is being aware of your sleep debt. So if you haven't slept at all this week, you need to be aware of, how many nights in the recent past have you not been able to sleep. And sleep debt is not something that you can just instantly repay. It doesn't work like that. Just by sleeping more on a couple of nights, you can help partially repay some of that, but you will never be able to fully repay it. And really the best thing is to try and avoid getting into sleep debt to begin with. Try and do everything that you can. Just because you have 7 hours a night and then you have a week of sleeping 9 or 10 hours, that doesn't mean that you're going to completely undo that damage. Lastly is to understand how your performance and your sleep requirements are varying. Like I was describing earlier, if you have significant cognitive and physical load during the day, you may need closer to 9 hours of sleep, and 7 may not be enough. So really be aware that the more load and the more stress that your body is under, the more sleep you're going to require to adequately recover. So sleep is the prerequisite for everything. And training, nutrition, recovery, mood, they all scale with sleep. Your optimization ceiling is really your sleep quality and duration. At the end of the day, it's really a non-negotiable 7 to 9 hours every single night, and trying to keep your bedtimes and wake times consistent to plus or minus 30 minutes. Understanding your chronotype, optimizing however you can, but within the 7 to 9 hour requirement. So sleep is basically the highest level intervention available. It fixes one variable and it has an improvement across all other domains. So a lot of people think that once you get older, you don't need to sleep as much. And that's not strictly true. You really do need the same duration. It's just that your body gets a little bit less effective at regulating its own circadian rhythms. It gets less effective at producing melatonin, but your bodies and your brain still require that sleep. So it can be a little bit more challenging to get that sleep, but that doesn't mean that you require less sleep. And lastly, a lot of people think that, it's all about the supplements. It's not. The supplements are there for optimization. 90% of it, for 90% of the people, are going to be fundamental underlying issues, whether it's caffeine intake or whether it's doing what you need to do in order to actually be able to fall asleep on time. So you do have control over most of that, and it's really important to recognize that. And can you survive on less sleep? Technically, yes, in the short term, but your recovery and performance ceiling will definitely drop, and it's important to be aware of those limitations. Also, if you guys want to know how this ties into the afternoon slump and when you start to feel really tired in the afternoon, make sure you check out this video.